All right, good morning, everyone. I'm obviously Sheriff Joseph Lombardo. I'm here to brief you on the latest details in the homicide of Review journalist, investigative reporter Jeff Gehrman. First and foremost, I want to offer my condolences to the Jeff's family, friends, and co-workers at the Review Journal. I want to thank our partners in the community who have helped us share crucial details with the public over the last few days. From the moment LVMPD detectives were called to the scene on Saturday morning, investigators have been working tirelessly to identify the suspect and effect an arrest. Under my direction, we enacted major case protocol Saturday to bring together the full force of LVMPD to solve this homicide. Major case protocol was first utilized in 2018. The goal is to bring together resources to maximize the investigative effort and ensure timely, clear, and consistent communication during a high-profile investigation. Additionally, large amounts of incoming information would need to be processed timely and with diligence. This has been the usual case from the beginning. The murder of an investigative journalist and the main suspect, an elected official here in Clark County. Because of the relentless follow-up of our detectives and with your help, I'm here to announce the arrest of 45-year-old Robert Tellus. He was booked in the Clark County Detention Center last night on the charge of open murder. This is a terrible and jarring homicide, one that has deeply impacted Las Vegas. Every murder is tragic, but the killing of a journalist is particularly troublesome. We hope the arrest of Tellus and his subsequent prosecution will ultimately provide a sense of justice for our community and Mr. Gehrman's family. And I would like to add, our work is done in this case. Detectives are still shifting through information. So in other words, the case is still continuing. We have several leads we're still following up on to solidify the case and to put to bed other allegations. So at this point, I'd like to bring Dory Korn, captain of the Homicide Bureau, forward, and he will walk you through the timeline associated with the case. Thank you.
Good morning. As you know, we began our homicide investigation about 5 days ago on Saturday, September 3rd. This was after we received a 911 call of an unresponsive male that was found on the side of his home. Our preliminary investigation revealed that the unresponsive male was deceased as a result of stabbings. We also determined pretty quickly that the victim was Jeff Gehrman, as the sheriff said. Jeff Gehrman is a well-known investigative reporter, and that was taken into account immediately. Some of the other things that were developed pretty quickly by our homicide investigation was that the suspect, as you see here in the photo to my left, your right, was wearing an orange shirt with reflective stripes, a straw hat, and was carrying a duffel bag, and what was likely an attempt to either disguise his identity or conceal his identity. We also know that the suspect was walking westbound, approaching Gehrman's home on Friday, September 2nd, the day prior to us being notified. On that morning, he approached Mr. Gehrman's home and went to the side of the house. Shortly after, Gehrman came outside of the garage door and then went to the side of the house, and ultimately an altercation took place between the suspect and the victim. We believe this happened around 11:18 a.m., and at that time, our victim was stabbed multiple times. As Sheriff Lombardo pointed out, he initiated major case protocol immediately based on the circumstances, which allowed us to bring in a lot more resources to address a lot of the tips and leads and information coming in from the public. Our detectives and everyone involved in this case have been working nonstop since Saturday. This is a very important case for everyone involved. And on day 2 of our major case protocol, we developed a very critical lead, which was a vehicle that we identified. It was a maroon-colored GMC Denali that was suspiciously driving around in the neighborhood on the morning of the murder, prior to the murder, and then certainly was there at the time when the murder happened. That vehicle had stopped multiple times throughout the neighborhood and was behaving suspiciously, or was suspicious. The second key piece on day 2 was we determined that the suspect wearing the orange shirt had fled in that vehicle, which connected the vehicle to the suspect. As I mentioned before in our earlier statements, we've been working all possible leads on this case. We've been exploring all theories and conducting simultaneous investigations into every piece of information we came across. There were 2 main areas that we were focused on early on. One was ensuring that this was not connected to a burglary series or anything of the sort. And then 2, looking at any work-related grievances or conflicts related to Mr. Gehrman's work. We knew that as an investigative reporter, he had written several articles, and there were different allegations and statements about potential people that would be upset about it. One in particular that we identified early on was Robert Tellus as a person of interest, because Tellus was upset about articles that were being written by Gehrman as an investigative journalist that exposed potential wrongdoing, and Tellus had publicly expressed his issues with that reporting, and then ultimately Tellus was also upset, from what we found out later, that there was additional reporting that was pending. So at that time we began focusing a little bit more on that as we conducted all of our investigative efforts. The other thing that was discovered by our detectives was there was a vehicle that matched a suspect's vehicle description, that maroon GMC Denali that was parked in front of Tellus's home. It was registered to his wife. And then we ultimately developed video evidence that showed that that vehicle, the GMC Denali parked in front of Tellus's home, had departed around 9 a.m. in the morning on the day of the murder and it returned around 12 p.m. just after the murder, which matched our timeline. We immediately began working on search warrants, and then we began searching. We executed those search warrants early yesterday morning, and that involved searching Tellus's home, his vehicles, and then also searching his body to collect the DNA sample to compare it to DNA recovered during the crime. At that time, as you noticed yesterday, we were still building our case, continuing our investigation, and we were waiting on DNA results, and so Tellus was released as we continued to build our case. Detectives continue to work very aggressively. As the sheriff pointed out, we've built a culture around here where we expect relentless follow-up on every case we're involved in, so they were relentless in their efforts. We worked as quickly as possible, and shortly after we developed information that indicated Tellus was driving the GMC Denali the morning of the murder. We also, through the search warrant effort, we recovered a pair of shoes, as you'll see here on my screen here to the left, that matched the suspect's description. Also, as you can see, there's apparent blood on the shoes, and the shoes were cut, likely in a manner to try to destroy evidence. In addition to the shoes, we recovered a straw hat that was also cut in a manner that was likely to destroy the evidence. And that straw hat, as you can see, matches the one in the photo. Just something to point out, that black brim is actually the interior part of the hat, a sweatband, not the exterior part. But we analyzed the hat, analyzed the shoes, and then ultimately, one of the most important aspects of this investigation was waiting on the DNA results, and we received positive DNA results that showed Robert Tellus's DNA at the crime scene. At that time, we immediately initiated our arrest operation and planning. The goal was to take Tellus into custody as safely as possible. And thanks to the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the leadership here, we were able to successfully execute that operation yesterday, and Tellus was taken into custody safely and arrested, as the sheriff talked about. I'll just quickly conclude my part by saying thank you to the homicide unit in particular. We are very fortunate in Las Vegas. We have the best homicide unit in the country with the highest solvability rate in the country, and they worked tirelessly, as the sheriff pointed out, to succeed in this case. And then there were a lot of supporting units from the lab, technicians, to our tactical teams, and everyone else involved that did a tremendous job, as well as the media. All of you really helped us when we asked for the help to get information out. You did that job for us and helped us, and the general public who provided tips and leads. So definitely appreciated. And with that, as I just reiterate, it's very important. We're only 5 days into this case. So there is still a lot of effort, as the sheriff pointed out, that needs to be conducted. And there will be more facts as we continue to make progress on this case. But we do believe this is an important case, and that's why everyone involved, from the very top of our agency as the sheriff to the lower parts working every single lead, took this case very seriously because they know the impact it has on our community and our country as a whole. With that, we'll turn it over to questions, and depending on the questions, the Sheriff or I will answer. Yes, sir.
It sounds like you were onto him fairly early, at least as a potential suspect. So once he was aware that you were onto him, how would you describe his demeanor, his level of cooperation?
So there's some details in the investigation we can't reveal at this time because we want to make sure we have a successful prosecution. But we were conducting simultaneous investigations into various leads, some related to Tellus, some related to burglaries and everything else. So can't speak to demeanor at this time, but it was successful in terms of focusing on him.
And is this video that we're showing right now to what you believe was the eventual homicide?
That is video of the suspect walking to the homicide and video to or from the homicide. We have video on both angles that we've shared with the public since, and it is a casual walk even after the homicide. Yes, sir, Greg.
Kenneth, I'm going to ask a quick one and then another one. Did you find the orange outfit?
So at this time, we're still finishing our investigative effort. We found the straw hat and the shoes. We're still processing other evidence that was recovered from the home.
The garage door remained open, correct?
We know that our victim exited through the garage door. I don't have the details on whether it was open at the time of our response, but we do have it documented.
Was anything taken from the home or from Mr. Garman?
At this time, we do not believe that anything was taken from the home or from Mr. Garman. Yes, sir.
Sir, can you address, has he been cooperative during an interview with law enforcement? And can you also address the circumstances of him being brought out in a stretcher after the arrest?
So, this time, regarding our interaction with the suspect, but I can tell you the footage you saw him coming out on the stretcher, he had self-inflicted wounds, and we were trying to provide medical attention to help him.
Well, did you describe the wounds?
That was going to be my question.
So at this time, I cannot describe the wounds, but we do know that they were non-life-threatening. Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe the situation of Tellus being brought back home only to be arrested a few short hours later?
And did the district attorney have any influence on why he was not arrested at that time during the interview?
So in the last press conference, one of the things I said was that it was not just important enough for us to identify and apprehend the suspect, but we wanted to do it in a way where we could have a solid, good prosecution. So in consultation with the district attorney's office throughout this investigation, and certainly at the time of determining release to continue to build our case. So yes.
Do you believe any of these? Do you believe there's any he was working on the suspect?
Right now, we can't speculate on the motive beyond what was already discussed. We know that Tellus was very upset about Garman's reporting already about his role as a public administrator and everything else that followed with that. Yes, sir.
So he was brought back to the home. We saw him go back in the hazmat suit, presumably because his clothes were taken. And then we sort of saw SWAT come in. He was uncooperative coming out. Is there going to be any look at the fact that an entire neighborhood was evacuated for a suspect with a, you were onto him, I understand you were waiting for that DNA, but that 2-hour window could have turned, could have been very different. So is there going to be any look at not releasing a potential murder suspect back to his home like that?
You know, there's a reason why people from all across the United States come to Las Vegas to apply with our agents to become police officers and detectives and SWAT officers and all that, and it's because we have a very professional and effective way of how we safely take people into custody in these types of very dynamic situations, and that was proven yesterday. And then the second reason is we have a community that's very supportive. So I understand some people might be frustrated with the disruption, but the way the operation worked, the community was supportive of how we did it, and they were certainly supportive of the outcome because everyone is safe today.
Right. We certainly support you, but he was able to go into that home, and sources say he inflicted self-harm on himself. Obviously, he was taken to the hospital. So something could have happened in that 2-hour window. So I think we're all a little curious, when was that why was that decision not made when he just walked back into the house?
Yeah, just as I answered.
That's not something we usually see.
Sure, understood. As I answered before, we wanted to provide a medical attention, which we were successful in doing so, and then we also wanted to make sure that we were consulting with our district attorney's office and ensuring a solid case to keep building the evidence, and that's what we did successfully. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Education, how long we might have been planning this, and are there any outstanding suspects?
At this time, as the sheriff pointed out, this is 5 days into the investigation. We had a lot of success early on because the sheriff enacted major case protocol, but there is still a lot of information to go through. We gave the information that we arrested the person for the murder, but we'll still go through everything and be able to analyze that a little bit further. Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, you said the murder of a journalist is especially troubling. Do you, now is probably not the appropriate time to talk politics, but do you condemn...
So why are we talking politics then?
You condemn former President Trump's normalization of violence against journalists?
No, I think this is probably the inappropriate venue to speculate on that or opine on that. I think it needs to be stated and noted that it is troublesome because it is a journalist, and we expect journalism to be a watchdog for government. And when people take it upon themselves to create harm associated with that profession, I think it's very important that we put all eyes on and address the case appropriately, such as we did in this case with this expediency associated with it. But let me provide some clarification on the question on the individual returning to the house. So that's dictated by the Constitution and the NRS, and the ability for an individual to leave on their free will until we obtain enough evidence to rise to probable cause to effect an arrest. And that was the reason why that took place at that time.
Sheriff, also, did you have any personal involvement in the case beyond the special protocols that you initiated?
No, ma'am. No, I did not.
Can you explain, so after you had left the search warrant and then the one officer came back by himself, why did he come back by himself? What was his intent at that point? Was he planning to arrest the suspect at that point, or why was he there by himself?
I'm not familiar with that. Yeah.
Just very briefly, so we wanted to make sure we maintained open communication with Mr. Tellus. We wanted to make sure we had a safe resolution of this. So it was our strategy to make sure we were overt and provided any channels of communication to continue as we continue to build our case.
But was it safe to have just one person there? Because a short time after that, you brought everybody in SWAT and armed. And
well, I think it's an assumption.
We don't publicly talk about our tactics, and I assure you there was more than one person there.
Sheriff, can you talk about the actual weapon that was used in the stabbing? Was that recovered, and what was that weapon?
At this point, we have not recovered it. We continue to search for that, and that's why Captain Corin has alluded that we're continuing the investigation. We're still in short proximity to this, and obviously, you know, all the legwork continues for the police agency and investigative functions on a case this complicated. And we have to ensure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's to ensure a successful prosecution.
Was Mr. Tellus interviewed? Did he give a statement, and or was he represented by an attorney at that time?
He was interviewed. He was consensually interviewed, voluntarily interviewed. He had the opportunity to obtain an attorney. He chose not to, and subsequent termination of the interview, he was let go at that time.
Can you talk about the Las Vegas Review-Journal involvement in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because they were instrumental in notifying us of the next of kin for Mr. Gehrman so that we could do those appropriate notifications of the family members before we made this public. And secondly, they were instrumental in providing us for information on his cases that he was working previously and currently associated with this case. And Captain Corin alluded to other directions we were pursuing because we didn't know absolutely at this point if Tellus was the involved suspect. We had to look at different crimes committed in the neighborhood. We had to pursue every aspect. And the Review-Journal provided us some additional information on a previous case that we had worked and made public in information in the public space as to MO, dress, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that, and we had to run that to bed as a result of the RJ, I'll use the RJ, bringing it forward.
Is Tellus still hospitalized?
I don't know.
Currently, he's at Clark County Detention Center.
Captain.
FBI used because of his position and being elected official?
I'm sorry?
Was the FBI used at all for his arrest because he was a public official?
No, we didn't feel the need to bring the FBI in as of yet. If it had gone across state line or rise to a different level of electronic evaluation, we would very well much brought in the FBI.
Sheriff,
I'll answer one more question.
you have remarkable video of the man you identify as the suspect approaching the attack scene. Do you have video of the attack?
We have some distorted video associated with the attack, and we are in the process of clarifying that video as we speak.
Captain, when did Tellus actually become a suspect, your prime suspect in this case? And when you came, I assume you didn't know when you had the press conference and you were asking for help, but when you had that press conference a couple days ago, was he already on your radar?
So, this will be the last question.
Part of major case protocol is to look at all leads at the same time. So we had a lot of personnel investigating very early on. Tellus is a person of interest. The exact time of when it becomes a primary suspect or secondary suspect is really irrelevant because we don't. When we overfocus on one area, we start losing evidence and losing other things. So the reality is, very early on into the major case protocol, we were doing a lot of things simultaneously, and that's what gave us the success here.
And
I'm sorry, we just...
Can I just ask one quick question?
Wrap it up, but we will have more information come out soon. We have a lot more facts on this case, so just give us some time. It's only been 5 days. Thank you, though. Appreciate it.